Alrighty folks, Buck Tanner here. Now I got a question for you. What do curtain rods, knives, and the most popular police sidearm in America all have in common? Well, they were all made by the same Austrian guy who'd never designed a firearm in his life until he was 52 years old. Yeah, you heard that right. The man behind Glock, that plastic fantastic that's sitting in holsters from LAPD to your local sheriff's department, started his very own career in making home decor accessories that your grandmother probably hung her drapes on. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. This curtain rod manufacturer didn't just stumble into the gun business, he engineered a hostile takeover of the entire industry using nothing but polymer, Austrian stubbornness, and what I can only describe as the most American success story ever told by a guy who wasn't even American. Now, let me paint you a picture of Austria in 1963. The Cold War is in full swing, Vienna is trying to stay neutral between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, and a 34-year-old engineer named Gaston Glock is running a tiny manufacturing company out of his garage in Deutsch Wagram. And what's this future firearms legend making? Curtain rods, steel products, and most importantly, polymer injection molded parts that probably ended up in half the homes in Austria. The man had 3 employees, a second-hand metal press, and absolutely zero experience with anything that went bang. But here's where it gets interesting. And this is pure Austrian engineering genius at work. Glock wasn't just making any old curtain rods, he was perfecting the art of polymer manufacturing, learning how to make plastic parts that were stronger, lighter, and more durable than anything his competitors could produce. Let's just dwell on that for a minute. While American gun manufacturers were still thinking in terms of steel and wood, this guy was already 15 years deep into understanding how to make polymer components that could withstand stress, heat, and repeated use. He just didn't know he was preparing for a career change that would make him a billionaire. And that, my friends, is where opportunity comes knocking in the late 1970s. See, before Glock ever thought about pistols, he got his first taste of military contracts through something completely different: knives. That's right. The same company that would revolutionize handguns started by making blades. In the late 1970s, the Austrian Bundesheer, that's their federal army, put out a tender for a Feldmesser, or a field knife. They needed something for their special forces and Alpine troops, and Glock thought, well, hell, I can make that. And he did. The FM78 field knife, a fixed blade beauty, with a polymer handle and a sheath that could double as a bayonet for their new Steyr AUG rifles. Now, this wasn't just any knife. This thing had a 6.5-inch carbon steel blade, weighed just over 7 ounces, and was built like a tank. Austrian troops are still carrying these things today, nearly 45 years later. That knife contract gave Glock something more valuable than money, though. It gave him contacts inside the Austrian military, relationships, trust. When you're about to bid on the biggest military contract of your life, having friends in high places? That don't hurt. Because in 1980, those same Austrian military folks made an announcement that would change Glock's life forever. The Austrian army was done with their World War II era Walther P38s. Don't get me wrong, the P38 is a fine pistol. First locked breech pistol with a double action trigger, saw action in every major conflict from World War II to Afghanistan, but after 40 years of service, it's time for an upgrade. So the Federal Ministry of Defense put together a list, and I'm talking about a serious list here, 17 criteria that their new service handgun had to meet. We're talking NATO standard 9mm, drop safe, ambidextrous controls, easy maintenance, simple construction, the works. And the testing? Holy hell, the testing was brutal. These pistols had to survive 15,000 rounds of standard ammunition, then get hammered with overpressured rounds that generated double the normal operating pressure. We're talking about 5,000 bar instead of the usual 2,500. That's enough pressure to turn a lesser gun into expensive shrapnel. And the competition was fierce. You had Heckler and Koch, Sig Sauer, Beretta, all the heavy hitters with decades of firearm experience. These were companies that had been making guns since before Gaston Glock was even born. And then there's this 52-year-old curtain rod manufacturer who'd never designed a firearm in his life. Now, most people would have looked at that competition and said, thanks but no thanks. Not Gaston Glock. This madman looked at that list of requirements and thought, you know what, I can do even better. Here's where the story gets wild. Glock didn't just decide to build a pistol, he decided to build the perfect pistol. He gave himself 3 months to do it. 3 months. Let that sink in. What the heck are you going to be doing in 3 months? Companies like Colt and Smith & Wesson spent years developing new firearms. Glock had a summer. But here is the genius part. Instead of trying to figure it out himself, he assembled a dream team. Military experts, police officers, civilian sports shooters. anyone who'd actually used handguns in real world. He basically crowdsourced the perfect pistol design before crowdsourcing was even a thing. And because he had zero preconceptions about how a pistol should be built, he approached the whole thing like an engineering problem. No sacred cows, no, that's how we've always done it. Just pure analytical problem solving. The result? Glock 17, baby. And yes, it was called the 17 because it was his 17th patent, not because of the magazine capacity, even though that 17-round capacity was pure serendipity and marketing gold. Now, let me tell you what made this pistol so revolutionary, because it wasn't just one thing, it was everything. First off, let's talk about that polymer frame. In 1982, suggesting that a serious military sidearm should be made of plastic was like suggesting that race cars should be made out of cardboard. People thought Glock had lost his damn mind. But as you know, this wasn't just any plastic. This was precision-engineered polymer that was lighter than steel, more resistant to corrosion, and could be molded to exact specifications every single time. No more hand-fitting parts, no more variations between individual pistols. Every Glock 17 that rolled off the line was identical to every other Glock 17. Then there was a safe action system. Instead of a traditional hammer or simple striker, Glock designed a system with 3 internal safeties: trigger safety, firing pin safety, and drop safety. This gun is ready to fire the instant you pulled the trigger, but it was also safer than a Swiss bank vault when you weren't actively shooting it. The simplicity, sweet mother of pearl, the simplicity was beautiful. Your average pistol at the time had 50, 60, maybe sometimes 70 individual parts. The Glock 17 had 35 parts to do everything a pistol needed to do, and do it better than guns with twice as many components. And field stripping? 4 steps, people. No tools required. You could take this thing apart blindfolded, clean it with whatever you had handy, put it back together, and it would run like a Swiss watch. But the real genius was in the details that nobody talks about. See, Glock didn't just design a new pistol. He designed a new ammunition specifically for that pistol. The 45 ACP cartridge was engineered from the ground up to deliver maximum stopping power while being absolutely reliable in semi-automatic action. It's like getting a custom-tailored suit, except the suit was made of lead and copper and traveled at 830 feet per second. The barrel lockup system was pure engineering poetry. Most early semi-autos were finicky, jamming if you looked at them wrong, but Glock's tilt and barrel design was so robust that soldiers could field strip it blindfolded, clean it with whatever they had handy, and it would still run like clockwork. Sounding familiar? Yeah. Now let's talk about that trigger. Glock managed to create a trigger system that was consistent, predictable, and safe, all while maintaining the simplicity that made the whole system work. Every trigger pull felt exactly the same as the last one, whether it was the first round or the 1000th. But here's what really set Glock apart. It was designed by someone who understood that a military sidearm isn't a range toy. It's a tool that's got to work when your life depends on it, in conditions that would make other firearms cry for their mommies. So 1982 rolls around and it's time for the Austrian military trials. You got all these established firearms manufacturers, companies with century-old reputations, going up against a guy who 3 months earlier was making curtains. The testing was absolutely brutal. These pistols were dropped, frozen, baked, buried in mud, and shot till their barrels glowed. They were testing for accuracy, reliability, durability, and safety under conditions that would destroy most civilian firearms. And guess what? When the smoke cleared, the curtain rod manufacturer had beaten every single one of them. The Glock 17 didn't just pass the Austrian military's tests, it dominated them. It outperformed pistols from companies that had been making firearms since before Austria was even a country. The Austrian army adopted it as the P80, Pistole 80. It ordered 25,000 units, and Gaston Glock officially became a firearms manufacturer. But that was just the beginning, because what happened next would make Glock a household name around the world. See, word travels fast in military circles, and by 1983, everyone was talking about this Austrian plastic pistol that was outperforming everything else on the market. The U.S. Department of Defense, who'd been planning to replace the legendary M1911 since the late 70s, invited Glock to submit the Glock 17 for evaluation. Now, here's where we get a little turn. Glock submitted 4 pistols for testing, but he had to decline the full contract because his little operation couldn't possibly meet the production demands of the U.S. military. I mean, can you imagine? The U.S. Army could have been carrying Glocks instead of Beretta M9s if Glock had just had a bigger factory. But that didn't stop the Glock train. Norway adopted it, Sweden adopted it, and by 1992, some 350,000 Glock handguns had been sold worldwide. with 250,000 of them right there in the United States. And this is where things get really interesting. Let's rewind a little bit to 1985. Glock opened up shop in Smyrna, Georgia, and American law enforcement took notice. Here was a pistol that held more rounds than a revolver, was more reliable than most semi-autos, and was so simple you could train a rookie to use it in an afternoon. Police departments started switching over in droves, as you can imagine. The NYPD, LAPD, departments across the country started all trading in their .38 Specials and .357 Magnums for these Austrian plastic pistols. And today, my friends, over 65% of federal, state, and local agencies in the United States carry, you guessed it, Glocks. But it wasn't just the cops who were paying attention. Civilians loved them too. Here was a pistol that was reliable, accurate, and affordable. You could buy a Glock for what you'd pay for a decent revolver, but you get 17 rounds instead of 6, and it would run no matter what you fed it. And then Hollywood got involved, and that's when things got a little crazy. Remember Die Hard 2? Of course you do. That scene where they're talking about the Glock 7 porcelain gun made in Germany that doesn't show up on an X-ray machine and costs more than what you make in a month. Now that was complete Hollywood nonsense, but it scared the hell out of people, and suddenly everyone was talking about these invisible plastic guns that terrorists could smuggle onto airplanes. Never mind that Glock had plenty of metal parts that show up just fine on X-ray machines, or that it's made in Austria, not Germany. Hello. The controversy actually helped sales. Nothing makes Americans want something more than being told they can't have it. And when people actually got their hands on Glocks and realized they were just really good pistols, the hysteria died down, but the sales kept climbing. But the real genius of Glock wasn't just in making one great pistol, it was making a whole family of great pistols. See, once Glock had the basic design figured out, he could adapt it to just about anything. Want a compact version? Glock 19. Want something in 45 ACP? Glock 21. Want a subcompact for concealed carry? Glock 26. Maybe you want something in 10mm that'll stop a charging bear. Yeah, that's Glock 20 for you. The beauty here was that they all worked the same way. Same trigger system, same takedown procedure, same basic operation. If you could shoot one Glock, you could shoot any Glock. The consistency here was pure gold for law enforcement agencies and military units. And then we got the aftermarket support. Man, it went absolutely bonkers. You can customize a Glock more than a hot rod. Triggers, barrels, sights, grips, finishes. If it exists on a Glock, somebody out there's making an upgraded version of it. Like Legos for grown-ups, except these Legos can punch holes in paper at 50 yards. Today there are dozens of Glock variants in multiple calibers and sizes, from the tiny Glock 42 and 380 to the full-size Glock 34 competition pistol. There's a Glock for every application. So here we are over 40 years later, and Gaston Glock's boring rectangular pistol is still the gold standard. It's been carried by heroes, legends, and regular folks who just wanted the best. It influenced every modern pistol design that came after it, and it's still being manufactured by dozens of companies because the demand never went away. But more than that, the Glock represents something uniquely Austrian too. And ironically, well, that's American. The idea that if you're gonna do something, you might as well do it right the first time. Glock didn't just design a gun, he designed the gun, the template, the gold standard. When other countries wanted to build a service pistol, they looked at the Glock. When gun designers wanted to create something new, they started with what Glock had already figured out. The Glock didn't just set the bar, it is the bar. And the crazy thing is, after all these years, all these innovations, all these improvements in modern pistol design, the Glock is still here. It's still relevant, and it's still desired. That ain't luck, folks. That's excellence. So let me throw some numbers at you that'll make your head spin. Since 1982, Glock has produced over 10 million pistols. 10 million! That's more than the population of most countries, and every single one of them traces back to that curtain rod manufacturer who took a 3-month crash course in firearms design. Gaston Glock, who started this whole empire at age 52, lived to see his company become a global phenomena. The man passed away in December 2023 at age 94, worth over $1 billion. And those early Generation 1 Glocks, the ones with pencil barrels and serial numbers starting with AF, HF, AK, and AL, well, those are collector's items now. Gun guys hunt for them like they're searching for buried treasure because they represent the beginning of a revolution. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you the Glock is the perfect pistol for every single person on the planet. It's not. Some folks don't like the trigger feel. Some people want a manual safety. Some shooters prefer the heft of an all-steel gun or the classic lines of a 1911. And you know what? That is perfectly fine. The gun world's big enough for all of us, and variety is exactly what makes it interesting. But here's what I will tell you. If You want a pistol that will work when you need it to work, that's simple enough for anyone to operate, accurate enough to hit what you're aiming at, and reliable enough to bet your life on, the Glock has earned its place at the top of that list. It ain't just the prettiest gun ever made, and it may not be the most elegant or the most traditional, but it works. And it works in the desert, the Arctic, the mud, the rain, after being dropped, after being neglected, being abused. It just works. Sometimes, that's all you need. Of course, Glock's success didn't go unnoticed by the competition either. Every major firearms manufacturer has tried to build their own Glock killer over the past 40 years. Smith & Wesson came out with the M&P series, Springfield gave us the XD line, Sig Sauer developed the P320, Walther brought us the PPQ, and you know what? Some of them are damn fine pistols. The competition's pushed everyone to build better guns, and that's great for all of us as consumers, but here's the thing. They're all chasing that standard that Glock set way back in 1982. Striker fired? Glock did it first. Polymer frame? Glock pioneered it. High-capacity magazines? Glock made them mainstream. Simple takedown? Guess who? Glock. Every innovative feature that modern pistol manufacturers tout as revolutionary was standard equipment on the Glock 17. Now, that's not to say these other pistols aren't good, many of them are excellent, but they're all playing catch-up to the design that's older than most of the people shooting them. And the influence that Glock has goes way beyond firearms. This pistol's changed how we think about manufacturing, about materials science, and about what's possible when you throw out the rule book and start from scratch. Before Glock, plastic was a dirty word in serious manufacturing. Plastic was for toys, for cheap knockoffs, for things that didn't matter. What Glock did is prove that engineered polymers could be stronger, more durable, and more reliable than traditional materials. Today, you'll find advanced polymers in everything from race cars to spacecraft, and a lot of that acceptance races back to a pistol that proved plastic could be better than steel. Glock also changed how we think about simplicity and design. In an era when everything was getting more complex, more computerized, more complicated, Glock went the other way. Fewer parts, simpler operation, and easier maintenance. And it worked better than anything else on the market. That's philosophy. Sometimes the best solution is the simplest solution. It influenced everything from smartphones to software design. Glock didn't just change guns, folks. It changed how we think about making things. But where could it possibly go from here? Well, they're not standing still. They're constantly refining the design, improving manufacturing processes, and developing new variants for specific applications. The Glock 44 and 22LR brings the platform to new shooters. The various MOS or modular optic system models make it easier to mount red dot sights. The slimline pistols like the 43X and 48 push the boundaries of concealability. But the core philosophy remains the same. Build the most reliable, most effective, and most user-friendly pistol possible. Don't mess with what works. And honestly, that's probably the right approach. When you got a design that's been proven in combat on the streets and on the range for over 4 decades, I mean, when you got a pistol that's trusted from everyone from Navy SEALs to suburban soccer moms, when you've built something that just works every time without fail, why would you change it? The answer is you don't. You just keep making it better. So there you have it, folks. The wild, improbable, absolutely true story of how a 52-year-old Austrian curtain rod manufacturer became the most successful firearms designer in modern history. Gaston Glock took a 3-month crash course in pistol design and created a gun that's been carried by more cops, soldiers, and citizens than any other handgun in history. He proved that sometimes the best way to revolutionize an industry is to ignore everything that industry thinks it knows and start from scratch. The Glock ain't just a pistol. It's proof that good ideas can come from anywhere, that innovation doesn't require decades of experience, and sometimes the most boring-looking solution is actually the most brilliant one. Listen, if you enjoyed learning about how a curtain rod manufacturer conquered the firearms world, you are gonna love our deep dive into other firearms legends that changed everything. Click on that video right here where we break down the complete history of the 1911, the pistol that defined American firepower for over a century. And find out why John Moses Browning's masterpiece is still giving modern designs a run for their money. Trust me, after learning about Glock's incredible journey, you're going to want to hear about the gun that set the standard he had to beat. Till next time, keep your powder dry, your groups tight, and remember, sometimes the most revolutionary ideas come from the most unexpected places. Y'all